Welcome to Africa Event Connect. I'm your host, Projeni Pather, and today we're exploring one of the most discussed yet often misunderstood topics in our industry, and that's diversity and inclusion. Now, how do we move past the cliches and actually create meaningful change in our events, in our teams, and in our organizations? Now, to help us unpack this, today I have Pamela Xaba, founder of Nonkosi Creatives and a transformation leader known for driving real purpose-driven change. I love that. She'll be leading the People Circle at the upcoming Festival of Eventing, 8th to the 9th of August at Century City in Cape Town. And today she's here to give us a sneak preview of what insights we can expect. So welcome, Pam.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. As I think when we were preparing and we were joking earlier, is that I'm always interviewing people. So I'm now on the other
side.
So I'm just going to try my best not to take over and end up asking you questions. But no, let's go for it. But
Okay.
we're covering a topic that's very dear and close to my heart and very deeply personal as well.
Wonderful.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Our absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
Now let's dive straight into it. You and I
Yeah.
were talking about those, our industry, for example, we all love the words diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
But what is the biggest misconception about that? And let's delve into it. What does diversity and inclusion mean? Very often people box it into color.
Yep. So I think maybe just a bit of background so that when I speak and then I unpack your
Sure.
question so people can relate, what makes me one of the ideal people to talk on
Yes,
the subject.
true
So first
story.
and foremost, I'm an HR professional. I've been in the HR space my entire career for over 22 years in various sectors of our economy, ranging from financial services, FMCG, public sector, automotive, and the technology sector. And I then run my own HR consultancy business that I started about 2 years ago, and really leveraging on the network. And really, as an HR professional, one of really my pain points in my working career was really, to your question, to how do we demystify
Yeah.
the concept of, diversity and inclusion, because we all know that, you said to me, look, how do we, the first thought that comes to mind is about color, race, and gender, most often than not, more especially in the South African context,
That's
because,
true.
given where we come from as people and our history, and our colonial past and apartheid and all of those things, so we've got a very, very troubled past. So it's then natural, almost natural for people to contextualize it in the context of race and gender, more especially also when it comes to our legislation like BBBEE and employment equity. But diversity and inclusion is much broader than that, So if you look at, disability, if you look at neurodiversity, if you look at different perspectives, different backgrounds, because even within the race agenda, you still get, even if people are, it's like black people, even within the black community, you still get so much diversity in terms of language, in terms of background, in terms of, ethnicity, in terms of cultural perspectives. And so we mustn't just, the danger then of thinking about diversity just only in the context of race and color becomes, that's why it's been so political of late, because, the minute we think about it in the context of race, we think that, no, if we're promoting one race, we're trying to exclude the other race. But it's to say, how do we coexist, as humans, from a humanity point of view, and be honest about, given where we come from, as a society, be honest about who has been disadvantaged in the past, and how do we address those things and make sure that people that did not in the past have access to certain opportunities, that did not have access to certain, information or certain platforms, how do we address that without necessarily taking away too much from the one group and giving to the other group? But how do we, over time, because it's also not a magic wand, right?
No.
It's like over a period of time, how do we keep this the diversity agenda on the surface, and how does it get authentically embedded in our society and in our organizations, in terms of whatever strategies that our organizations are trying to employ, but always making sure that we've got the diversity and inclusive leadership lens in mind. Even when we're designing system and we're designing products, we're saying, okay, who is this product meant for, and who is it excluding? You know, and because then, so if it's excluding a certain group of people, why? You know, and how do we then mitigate that as an organization or as a society or as a government? Yeah, sorry,
That
it's
is
a
very
long-winded
interesting. No.
answer. But yeah.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
So practically speaking, can you share an example of an organization that moved past the check boxes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And truly embedded
Yeah.
inclusion?
It would be so probably, it would be so probably unfair of me to single out one organization, because I think,
Or rather,
oh yes,
let me rephrase that question.
Yes.
Let's not talk about the name of the organization,
Yeah.
but what made the difference
yes,
in what
yes.
they did?
Yes, yeah. So the thing is, here's the thing. We need to say, you know, what approach are organizations using when it comes to, you know, embedding diversity and inclusion practices in their organizations? Because then maybe that's the question that we need to answer.
exactly.
Because, you know, if you look at you know, most organizations, and also in the HR fraternity, is that most HR professionals, they'll say, oh no, we're doing this program at our organization. Look how nice, how fabulous we are. Look how impactful we are. And which is good. And most organizations are doing that. But the question that needs to be answered is, you know, how embedded is diversity into your organizational strategy? And the leadership framework? Because it's one thing to say, oh, it's Pride Month this month, and hey, you know, we are all on LinkedIn celebrating Pride Month, which is fine, but you know, does your diversity and inclusion approach consider things like, what are the governance bodies in your organization? What is the organizational leadership agenda or voice when it comes to diversity and inclusion? And in terms of also your human capital, when it comes to D&I frameworks, how embedded is this in terms of the human capital value chain in your organization, from when a person joins your organization to a point where they exit the organization? Even when they exit, how do you treat that individual that exits the organization, you know, to mitigate things that when people leave organizations and then they go on, probably on social media or whatever, expressing their dissatisfaction about how they were treated because they have left the organization for whatever reason.
Absolutely.
So, and also, how do we ensure that the inclusive culture is embedded in the organization in terms of the entire, you know, human capital value chain and the employee life cycle? But
I like what you're saying there, Pam, because I think in terms of, you talked about Pride Month, and very often we become reactive, right?
Yes.
We know that there is an event coming up, or we know that there is a public event that we all need to show our support to.
Yes.
And then we're sitting there and saying, how do we include here now? But what you're saying is that it needs to start much earlier, and it goes to the strategy of the organization as a whole. So that needs to be that governing strategy.
Absolutely. So that it's not seen as a disjointed initiative that's, oh, we're just waking up. Oh, by the way, it's Pride Month. Is to say, you know, how do we even make, you know, when it comes to sexual orientation, right? You know, how do we make those group of people feel on a day-to-day basis in our organization, in our community, in our circles, even in our social circles, right? And how do we, it's even in the little things, you see someone who looks or sounds a certain way, who does things differently from you at a mall,
Yes.
in a shop, what comes to mind for you? What comments do you make? What judgments do you make about that individual? So it's something that we need to be conscious about, So,
Right.
but then how does it relate back to the question that you asked? What made a difference, or what, is the
Yeah.
organization that stands out for me? It's for the simple answer is that organizations and society groups and communities are doing various things
Right.
as far as diversity is and inclusion is concerned, but is how embedded are these frameworks and these practices and these initiatives into the strategic objectives of that group or of that community or of the organization. So that's why you get comments where people say, no, this diversity and inclusion initiatives, they don't work. That's why you also hear some sentiments in the political space that diversity does not work because it was never embedded in the fiber and
Okay.
of the fabric of the organization in the first place.
Now that boils
Yeah.
down, goes back to the leadership of the organization
Yes.
more
Yeah.
often than not, right?
Yeah.
Now we often hear about inclusive leadership,
Yes.
right? But it seems to be sometimes a very abstract concept for
Yeah.
many people. So
Yeah.
what does it look like practically? Especially in our event space, for example, are you going to be at the Festival of Events coming up in Century City next month? How does it practically work for us? How can we consider that in our leadership styles in the event space?
Yeah. No, so first of all, I think we put too much pressure on leaders. So before someone is a leader, they are a human being first. They're either a mother, a father, an uncle. They've got, so we must always remember that, leaders are human beings as well, and they will make mistakes. They have their own biases, conscious or unconscious. So that's the first thing. So, but then when it comes to the eventing space, I mean, we attend and we curate and we get invited to speak in a lot of events,
Yeah.
and what I often say to my close circles is that, we shouldn't just have conferences just for the sake of conferences, because then they end up being talk shops.
Talk
and
about
we talk,
talk.
and it's like sort of like a kumbaya, yay, and we're all pumped up, and then we leave. And then what happens, after that? So I think that's why I'm particularly excited, about the Festival of Eventing as well, because I've just seen, just looking at the program and just the caliber of speakers, but the diversity and the diverse voice and perspectives. Because the danger also with, the diversity and inclusion space, you find that the voices that are most vocal when it comes to DEI, it's probably your previously marginalized voices. So you find a lot of black females in this space. You find a lot of disability groups. You find a lot of, when it comes to race, you also find a lot of people of color. That are they've got a very strong voice when it comes to DEI. But then, what I like then about the Festival of Eventing, when I look at the diverse, it's all people from all walks of life, and also global speakers, and speakers that are also international, outside of Africa, outside of, South Africa. And it's exactly that, when it comes to eventing, that we mustn't just talk and come together for an event just for the sake of it. Is to say, do I see and hear someone who looks like me in this event?
Yes.
Irrespective of race and whatnot, but is it something that relates to me as a human being from a social context, as well as from a professional context, and a personal context when it comes to their head, heart, and mind.
Of course.
So those are the things then that I think we should watch out for when we do events and conferences. And I think I'm particularly excited about the 8th and the 9th of August.
I know. We're looking forward to I'm going to be
Yes,
there. I'm
yeah.
going to be at your session.
Yes.
Now, I also admire the program a lot. I think, it has so much to offer and the variety of
Yes,
speakers and content. But
yes,
very often, as event organizers, we
yes,
often gravitate towards the big names
yeah,
or the popular trends, right,
yeah,
to attract crowds.
yeah,
So how do we balance what's popular with genuine, meaningful representation? What is your take on
yes,
that?
yeah. So I think we tend to go with what's popular mainly because how I would define it is that any event needs visibility. So you need so because you don't just do an event for the sake of doing an event. You want to give that event a voice. You want to make sure that the impact of that event is scalable long
Yes.
after the event has happened. So we then gravitate towards, perhaps maybe popular faces or popular voices, not only because they are popular, but because they bring with them visibility that is needed for that event, but they also bring the impact and the influence that is needed for that event. But how do we then balance and make sure that we also have new faces? We also have new voices, because it doesn't mean that popular voices, they're the ones that have the most impact. Yes, they might give you visibility, but then, when they say a new broom sweeps clean. So that's why you also need new perspectives in your event space, more especially where we are from a geopolitical space, also just in terms of the African agenda, right? So I think for the longest time, we've looked to the West and all these other countries, Europe and the US, just for solutions and for benchmarking. And if data comes from certain countries, it's seen as proper, legit, and But then, how do we then start to think about African solutions and African case studies to solve African issues
Yeah.
and African problems? So this event, what I've seen is that it's got a lot of, popular but impactful and visible voices and faces, but it also has a balance of new voices and new faces from the African continent that I haven't seen before. And I'm saying, this is like really, really interesting, because then that's what diversity is about, right?
Yeah.
It's bringing together a collective of your different perspectives so that we can learn from each other, because it broadens and it widens your mind. Because you can imagine that you are always in the same circles and you're always consuming the same information. But then the minute then you start to listen to other people that you haven't, spoken to before, that will give you, because life is a lifelong, learning journey. So I think that's what makes it really, really interesting in terms of balancing the popular and the new.
And the new.
Yes.
Now, when we think about diversity and
Yeah.
inclusion, we often think of it as at a corporate level, right? That's where it is. It's part of the strategy, the organizational culture, and how do we bring it onto the floor and to the people, etc. Now, you being part of this circle at Festival of Events, where we're talking about diversity inclusion with respect to the eventing industry, right? And how do we bring that down from that strategic level in corporate organizations to our ecosystem of event organizers, suppliers, venue operators? We're all businesses, each of us, right? And we operate as businesses. And then we create these events, and we need to basically bring that diversity and inclusion into all the elements of the event space. And just, at the top of my mind, I can think, there's so many levels, but
Yeah.
how do you think we should approach that on an event level?
Yeah. So, first of all, why do we think of diversity and inclusion as a corporate as a corporate
Checkbox.
agenda?
It's a
Or
checkbox.
but then what
Yeah.
makes a corporate? Maybe let's start there.
Yes.
So because I think people do business with people.
That's true.
Right. So we've created this basis because of obviously how the world and the world of business is organized. So then you get terms like corporates, but who's in the corporate? It's human beings. And where do these human beings come from? These human beings come from homes.
Yep.
They come from communities. They come from different backgrounds. They come from different corners of the continent. They come from different corners of the globe and the world, right? So when we then get together in an eventing space, so the discussion that needs to be had is that how do we make, diversity and inclusion human at a society level first, because it happens on a day-to-day basis. It might be that maybe in a rural community somewhere in KZN or somewhere in Limpopo, they don't call it diversity and inclusion, right? But basically, if you have to break it down, diversity and inclusion is really how people, relate to each other on a day-to-day basis, right? So in relating with each other, there might be points of, conflict, or there also might be points of connection. There might be points of, collaboration, and. So we need to then say, when we get together in an eventing space, what are we solving for? Right?
Yes.
Why are we even getting together?
Yes.
Right? So how do we actually break down the concept of diversity and inclusion to a human level that is relatable, because it's what we do on a day-to-day basis? And then how do we take that back, that type of thinking back to our workspaces and saying, okay, fine, if I'm a CEO or a CFO at an organization, and we are trying to execute X in terms of our strategy, right? So before we then, because obviously organizations are not only there just, to sing kumbaya and be nice to everyone, they're also there to make profit. But in doing so, right, how do we look at our strategy execution from a diversity or transformation lens, in a context that it includes the voices of society that we are producing these products and services for in the first place? Because if we don't do that, it's actually the people in our communities and societies that actually buy our products and services, right? So when it comes then to the eventing space, because we're inviting all of these influential and decision makers from these corporates, so the message is that then we're getting together in this eventing space to talk about different concepts and this, and how do we then practically take that back to our organization and embed this concept into our strategy so that it becomes relatable to the communities and our clients in terms of the services and products that we produce ultimately.
Brilliant.
So I hope that makes sense.
it
I know I
does.
give
No.
long-winded answers, but I'm just trying to paint the picture and
I
make
love
it
it.
simple. Yeah.
I love it, Pam. So for me, there's two layers here. If I just split that event space group, right,
Yeah.
as an organizer myself, if I have to look at, we've got our internal teams.
Yep.
Where we have to bring the diversity and inclusion into. Now, we've got these teams are working on every element of the project, right? Making sure that we tick all those boxes. So let's look at that part first. How would you give, what advice would you give to leadership within those teams to make sure we incorporate diversity and inclusion in our planning stages, in our corporate culture?
Yeah, it's just basically how you make the next person feel in your team. I think let's
You've
not
simplified
complicate
it. No, I
it.
love that you've simplified it to
Yes.
that level.
Yeah, it's like relate to people like how you'd like to be treated and how you'd like to be made to feel, right? So see the other person as a human being first, right? And then that's what makes the work easier, right? So we work in teams, right? And so obviously within the team setup, there's a hierarchy and there's a protocol, but it's also about how do you use your position where you are. Well, let's say just hierarchy, you're an MD, you're a CEO and whatnot. But how do you use that position and power to positively influence and make sure that your team executes first and foremost with empathy, and they actually feel that they are seen, you see them as their leader, because it's one thing to give instructions and but how do you first understand the context from where they come from. That's why I started off with saying that we put so much pressure on leaders, as if then leaders are the only ones that are also expected to drive the inclusion agenda. I think it's everyone's responsibility, so because you shouldn't wait to be in a leadership position to have an inclusive mindset, have an inclusive mindset even to peer, because the work that we do is so interconnected that a person cannot execute a project on their own. So we all have a role and a task within that project. But then how do we then execute that with an inclusion mindset? So if I take this glass and put it here, how will it affect the next person, my team member? Or if I leave it and it's not supposed to be here, how will impact the next person who finds it here at that space where it's not supposed to be? It's simple things like that. It's like in a home setup, right? We all have responsibilities in terms of chores, who does the dishes, who does this, who does that. So it's the same thing at work. It's the same things with teams first, is that we need to consider the next person and the impact of our actions to the next person, and that's not only the leader's responsibility, so I think that's the inclusive mindset as far as wearing the diversity lens as well.
Got you.
I hope that helps.
No, it does. So and then we take it to the other part of the team. So we've done all the planning. We've incorporated all of that. We work together. We're mindful of the people that we're working with. Now we have to take into consideration our audience when we're doing our event plan and that execution. And that comes together in terms of, there's so many elements of that program, from the program to the registration to the food that we serve, right? To the facilities that we provide. How do we use that lens when we're planning that event?
So I think the lens that we need to wear first is that what will make this person buy the ticket to your event? Right. So because there are so many events and most of them cost money, and some
each
of them
are individual, right? That's exactly the trick, I suppose.
So why would your event stand out to me as a potential delegate for me to say, yes, let me, press that button on my banking app and buy this ticket, first and foremost? So let's say you've crossed that line and, obviously in terms of how you market your event, the visuals, the type of speakers, and the person is like, okay, I'm definitely going there, the location and all of those things.
It's for me.
Yes.
I feel it's made for me, right?
Yes, and you get that warm, fuzzy feeling like I'm definitely going. But then, it's also the experience that they get when they get there, right? Because it's one thing to buy something, like say I buy a pair of shoes and I get home and it doesn't fit. I'm like, oh my, what a waste. Do I return it and things like that? What do I ask for a refund or things like that? But it is it's really the ambience of the event. It's the how people are welcome, how you make them feel, because there's also, again, diversity inclusion in your event, is that, you don't treat, because also the audience is diverse, right? From all walks of life, from different backgrounds and whatnot, so that you do not make your audience feel that other people in the audience are more important than others, So when you have an audience and your event planner, you mustn't try and put and categorize people into classes. So everyone has bought a ticket. So when they get there, treat them as how they should be treated. They must feel special first as an individual, because when they walk away, they should become your advocate for your event. So when you do it the following year, they're like, oh my goodness, word of mouth. Did you attend this event? I'm definitely going. They can recruit more people into your event. But also, it's about not a talk shop. It's about what are they taking away from your event? What have they learned? Something new, or something that said, yes, this confirms why I'm here. What am I taking back to my community, to my home, to my organization, and how do I implement certain strategies from my event? So it's the entire experience from day one to day two, or from start to finish. And that's where we need to be careful as event organizers, that we do not drop the ball and think that, because also I've seen that in some events we tend to gravitate and give special treatment to maybe people that are coming outside of the country, or international speakers, and or things like that, but forgetting that also your local speakers or even your local audience is just as important. In fact, they are even more important, because then they are your advocates on a local level.
That's
where
true.
your event is actually housed. So treat people special and make them feel that it was a good investment for them to attend your event. I hope that answers the question, yeah?
Definitely. It
Yeah.
definitely does. I like that you simplified it, you've made it actionable. It's all real. It's things
Yes.
that we can physically take back and consider
Yeah.
and execute.
Yeah.
Now, as we wrap up today's session, we're all really excited.
Yes, no, we are
about the
definitely.
festival.
I was like saying to Debbie the other day that thank you so much for just inviting me to actually just host the People's Circle championing diversity and inclusion, because I think we've got so many DI practitioners and professionals out there, but also one thing that we need to remember, it's not so much about who is the best DI practitioner.
Yep.
It's about, how do we collaborate in the space
Yes.
to make sure that the united voices around diversity and inclusion are seen, heard, and felt, even on a global scale. But it's not so much about who shines more than the other, because I don't think that's the crux of the work. It's more about the impact on humanity. So if we then unite and collaborate and come together in events like this to actually spread the message, I think we are off to a really, really great start.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, to our listeners now who want to take some actionable insights with them, if we had to say to them, what can they do immediately so that they can make sure their next event is genuinely inclusive? Like, sometimes people don't even realize that they're not.
Yeah.
Do you know? So where do you start? Do you need to do a review, an audit, look at, because we get comfortable, right?
Yeah.
We get comfortable with our formula and we
Yeah.
feel like this works. I'm sure it works for everybody.
Yeah.
We do lots of research. We think we have clear channels of communication, and then we get all this information, and the next event comes, we do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you've mentioned it. You've said that we do a lot of research, and but we must also be able to sift through that research, and it must give us a clear direction in terms of this one question that says, what are we solving for? Because we've got so many events, and what is this one solving for? And once we've identified that, is that message clear out there to someone who's looking at this event that's coming up, on the 8th and the 9th, the Festival of Eventing, and what is it trying to solve for, right? It's bringing together diverse African voices and global speakers,
Yeah, exactly.
And so that, because then the minute you've answered that question, then you don't need to do something that you think is grand and spectacular, but it's what should be grand and spectacular is how you execute and you deliver the event.
Yes.
Right. But the simple thing is to just, a corporate that says, no, I want to be part, I want to exhibit on this and this, and this is because really they are passionate about the leadership agenda in the African continent. And we need to give Africa some legs. It's about time. right?
Yeah.
That we give ourselves legs to stand on. I think for the longest time, we've watched from the sidelines and we've allowed, as Africans, for people to tell us how to be, right? So we need to now say, how do we bring together diverse, powerful, and new African voices? And when I mean African, it's got nothing to do with color. Africa is very diverse.
It
So
is.
that's another thing. When we talk about Africa, we the first thing that we think black, right? And but Africa is a home to many,
That's
right?
true.
Many diverse voices, many races, and I always say that you are an African for as long as you call your home Africa.
Africa.
It's got nothing to do with, your ancestry and where you originated from. For as long as you call Africa your home, you're African first.
That's
Yeah.
heartwarming.
Yep. Yes.
Now, finally, your session,
Yeah.
the People Circle. It's
Yeah.
going to be one of the highlights at the festival. But why is this a can't miss experience?
Yes.
And what unique insights do you think that's going to be offering the people that are coming there? So we want them to be there. We want them to come and see you,
Yes.
listen to you,
Yes.
and learn so much more. This is just the tip of the iceberg that we're
Yes.
covering today.
Yes. No, thank you so much for this. I'm just so excited. When you actually pinch yourself and you think, I'm actually part of this. I'm actually
It's
part
happening.
of something bigger than myself.
Yes.
Because, that's what it should be about. It shouldn't be about just self-preservation and just me. It should be about, what is the bigger picture? Why
Yeah.
am I even in this space? There's something bigger than ourselves that we are solving for here, and that is the future of work and people and humanity, right? But really to look forward to here, and I think it's first and foremost the most amazing panel that I've moderated so far, and really strong and powerful voices, but also new voices. And, I always talk about cultural intelligence, and I think it will do exactly that. That we will not, yes, we're talking about championing diversity and inclusion, but, from a culturally intelligent approach, that says, because sometimes we tiptoe around certain concepts. Because we're thinking that if we vocalize and we verbalize certain, we will offend people. It's not so much. Let us talk about really what works in this space. Let us talk about what the challenges are. Let us talk about the race relations, but in a constructive
Yes.
manner, because what will not change is that I'm a black woman. What will not change is that you're you're an Indian female in Africa. And what will not change for the next person is that this is a white male, this and this and this. And we should be comfortable because this is who we are. That
Yes.
will not change whether we like it or not. But then how do we bring that in, the race discussion, in a culturally intelligent tone?
Yeah.
And really without, for so long, we've been afraid to talk about the things that impact us as human beings, and we put them in a way that we think it's palatable for business context or for political context, and we allow geopolitics to dictate what our voices should be around the things that give us joy, but also the things that give us pain. And let's talk about that pain and trauma in a constructive manner, in a way that will allow, healing in our corporate spaces, in our communities, in our society to take place, right?
And I love that you say that because it
yes,
allows people to be heard.
yes,
Because we're
Yes.
afraid that when we speak, that we're
Yes.
not going to be heard, or people will take
Yes.
offense.
yes, because then we should be asking, why are we then offended? If we're talking about things that are known, because these are known, these are known issues, but we should talk about them in a way that promotes healing
Yes.
and empathy and instills empathy in our leadership styles in society. Yeah.
Pam, you are truly amazing. I love
Yeah.
the heart that you come
Yes.
with.
Yes.
and
Yeah.
with purpose. And it is truly an engaging conversation. And I love your take on diversity and inclusion.
Yes.
It's really helps me to connect with the topic better. And I hope that it's helping everybody that's listening connect. And I know when they come to see you, we will
Yes.
connect on another level.
No, definitely we will. And I think just maybe as we close, it's just the point that we need to, is that we are human beings at first. And all of these things were created by us.
Yeah.
They did not, so even the problems that we have as humanity were created by us. So it's then us as human beings that should then come up with solutions.
Yep.
And say, yes, we can look to the past and complain, but then we can also wear a lens for the future that says, how do we do better? How do we really do? Because in the past, we might have hurt each other. We might have done all sorts of things as human beings,
Yes,
right?
as human
but
beings.
then, when you know better, you do better, So now that we know better, how do we then solve for the future?
Wonderful.
Yeah, those are my parting words.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pam.
Yeah.
That was truly, truly insightful and so much of heart, like I said, and helping
Yes.
us to connect. We
Yes.
really, really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm really genuinely excited to experience the People Circle firsthand, and I hope you are too. So to all of our listeners, if you're serious about building inclusive, innovative, and future-ready events, make sure you join us at the Festival of Eventing, 8th to 9th of August at Century City in Cape Town. Africa Event Connect is a proud media partner for the Festival of Eventing, and we can't wait to see all of you there. So until next time, keep leading, keep learning, and keep growing together.